Formicophilia. It's a Sunday afternoon and you're lying in a park feeling all cute when a grasshopper suddenly decides to take a scenic stroll up your arm. Now, most people would swat it away faster than you can say pest control, but for someone with formicophilia, this tiny invader is not an annoyance. It's a VIP guest delivering a special thrill. Yes, formicophilia is a fetish where individuals are aroused at the sensation of insects crawling on their skin. To them, the sensation of an insect on their skin isn't a creepy crawly nightmare, it's more like a ticklish, tantalizing spa treatment. The gentle tickling or biting sensation can trigger physical arousal, often heightened by the psychological thrill of engaging with something taboo or unconventional. It's like combining the adrenaline of a scary movie with the tingles of ASMR, except the actors are ants, spiders, or beetles, and their scripts are all improv. To make this bizarre fetish more weird, formicophiliacs actually love the idea of being a source of food for these insects. They literally find delight in turning themselves into a living banquet, and the more adventurous among them might even get creative and sprinkle honey or sugar on themselves to lure the ants or insects. But of course, formicophilia comes with risks. Let's not pretend that letting insects crawl on your skin is the same as a stroll through a candy store. Some bugs bite, some sting, and others might leave you regretting your choices very fast. However, formicophiles often pick their insect partners carefully, favoring critters that are less likely to cause actual harm. After all, no one wants their steamy bug encounter to turn into an ER visit. Hybristophilia. Picture this. You're at a random frat party sipping your drink when a stranger walks up to you from nowhere and starts talking. You're initially trying to brush him off and walk away until he mentions that he just got released from prison for unaliving someone. Now, the normal reaction to hearing this would probably be to walk away because the red flags are pretty glaring, right? But, well, for someone with hybristophilia, aka the Bonnie and Clyde syndrome, that's the highest level of attraction. Basically, hybristophilia is a psychological phenomenon where individuals feel attracted to people who've committed crimes. The term comes from the Greek word hubris, which means outrage, and philia, which is fondness. So in essence, it's when breaking the law becomes a little too attractive. For someone with this fetish, there is something undeniably thrilling about being close to someone who lives on the edge and loves the thrill of danger. It's like dating a human version of a roller coaster. Exciting, but slightly terrifying. Now, psychologists suggest that danger also activates the brain's reward system, so when you're around someone who exudes that danger, it would heighten your adrenaline and make everything else in your life spicy. Unfortunately, that spice might be paprika mixed with a felony. Then there's the fame factor, because if you follow the stories of infamous criminals like Ted Bundy and Richard Ramirez, you notice that they have a lot of fan mail in prison. That's because some hybristophiliacs are drawn to the notoriety of it all. It's like dating a celebrity, except their claim to fame isn't a hit album, it's, well, murder. Talk about deadly charm. They may even help with the crimes, smuggle goods to their criminal partners, or even act as accomplices. Aproctophilia. So for a while now, you've been talking to a guy you met on Instagram, and you both decide to finally have a first date. You head to the spot and everything looks absolutely perfect. However, as soon as your date finishes his first course, he starts to gas uncontrollably, and it stinks. Now, most people might blush, be a little embarrassed, or pretend they didn't hear anything, but well, not you. And that's because you have aproctophilia, which is a weird fascination with flatulence. In fact, the idea of hearing someone toot or smelling a person's gas just makes your heart skip a beat. For you, it's as romantic as roses, as thrilling as roller coasters, and as intimate as whispering secrets in the dark. To be clear, aproctophilia isn't about just liking a funny fart joke. We're talking about a genuine, heartfelt, or perhaps lung-felt attraction to the sound, smell, or sensation of flatulence. Just as some people find the smell of fresh-baked cookies comforting, aproctophiles feel a similar joy when their partner lets one rip. Vorarophilia. Vor. At its core, vorarophilia is all about a fetish where people are aroused by the idea of consuming someone or being consumed. Think of it like the adult-rated version of Little Red Riding Hood, where the wolf gets a little too into character. Now, for this fetish, there are two main sides, which are the predators, the ones doing the eating, often imagining themselves as dominant or powerful, as well as the prey, the guys who fantasize about being devoured because they see it as submissive, intimate, or or even comforting. However, you should note that most vor fantasies are pure imagination or roleplay, and nobody is actually grilling human meat like it's Saturday backyard barbecue. But they engage in this fetish using various means like roleplay, art, and stories, with a thriving community of artists and writers who create fantastical depictions of these scenarios. Think cartoonish wolves or dragons swallowing people whole. Virtual vor has also become quite popular because the internet has made it more visible. Pornophilia. So your friend invited you to a sleek, modern art exhibit and you see a gorgeous chair in the corner. But as you get closer, you realize it's not just a chair, but an actual person crouched, posed, and painted to resemble the real deal. Now, while most visitors are left gawking in confusion, you find yourself oddly intrigued and actually flustered because the thought of a human serving as furniture stirs something deep within you. In simple terms, you have a fetish called pornophilia, also known as human furniture fetishism. You see, pornophilia is a type of BDSM practice where a person is turned into a piece of furniture, quite literally. We're talking human chairs, tables, lamps, coat racks, and even coffee stands. Yes, that's right, some people find eroticism in merging the functional with the flesh. In pornophilia, one partner would act as the furniture, while the other takes on the role of the user, the artist, or simply the one in control. This fetish often involves bondage to help the furniture maintain its pose, as well as props and costumes to enhance the illusion. The appeal lies in the physical restraint, objectification, and sometimes even the endurance required to hold a particular form for long periods. It's definitely a niche kink, to say the least, but for those who indulge, it's a perfect blend of submission, creativity, and power dynamics. Autoplushophilia. After getting hounded by your niece to find a new stuffed teddy, you finally gave in and walked into the toy store. And as soon as your eyes landed on the giant fluffy teddy bear, you know it's definitely coming home with you, and not because you want to give it to your niece. It's actually because you have a weird fetish called autoplushophilia, so you derive excitement and sexual arousal from imagining yourself as a stuffed animal. Yep, you heard that right. While most people see a teddy and think, cuddly friend, you see a plushie and get turned on by the idea of becoming one. Autoplushophilia is a subset of objectophilia, which is an attraction to inanimate objects and closely related to roleplay or transformation fetishes. However, its defining feature is that the individual doesn't simply love plush toys, they want to embody one. It's less about collecting stuffed animals and more about imagining or enacting themselves as the toy, complete with fluff, fur, and button eyes. Think of it as teddy bear cosplay, but taken to a very personal level. However, the thing with this fetish is that most people engage and find the appeal in it because of the comfort and safety. Stuffed animals are often associated with warmth, comfort, and childhood innocence. So by imagining themselves as a plushie, individuals may tap into those feelings of security and nostalgia. I mean, who wouldn't want to live their best life as a snuggly teddy bear free from adult worries? Balloon fetishism, lunars. If you were to walk into a room filled with beautiful blown-up balloons, you'd probably try to pop some or even play and bounce them around. However, for a lunar, these balloons are more than just inflatable decor. They are the centerpiece of a highly specific and deeply personal form of attraction known as balloon fetishism, a paraphilia where balloons are a source of sexual arousal, emotional connection, or both. For lunars, balloons are objects of desire, comfort, and sometimes fear. Yes, fear. In fact, one of the most fascinating aspects of this fetish is how it intertwines pleasure, anxiety, and anticipation. You see, lunars come in all shapes, sizes, and preferences, much like their beloved balloons. The pop lovers find excitement in the bang and the tension of a balloon slowly inflating or being squeezed builds anticipation, and the loud pop is the climax, both literally and metaphorically. For them, the burst of sound and destruction is exhilarating. On the other end of the spectrum are those who adore balloons but can't bear the thought of them popping. For non-poppers, balloons are cherished objects of affection, cuddled, caressed, or simply admired for their shape, color, and texture. However, as with any fetish, being a lunar can come with its own set of challenges. Many lunars feel self-conscious or misunderstood about their interests, especially since balloons are typically associated with children. This can make it hard for them to share their desires with others. But online communities have provided a safe space for lunars to connect connect, share experiences, and celebrate their unique passion. It's basically a colorful world of squeaks, squishies, and surprises. Nasophilia. Yes, nasophilia, or nose fetishism, is exactly what it sounds like, an attraction to noses. Basically, for people with nasophilia, noses aren't just functional breathing apparatuses or sneeze factories, they're objects of beauty, sensuality, or even desire. The curve, the nostrils, the symmetry or asymmetry, the little tiny hair follicles inside, and the two tiny holes are absolutely captivating. Now, at its core, nasophilia is a form of partialism, meaning the focus of sexual attraction is on a specific body part, in this case, the nose. It could be the shape, size, or texture of the nose, or even specific actions like sniffing, sneezing, or flaring nostrils that evoke desire. Some even have specific preferences. Some nasophiles might prefer sharp, angular noses, while others are drawn to round, bulbous ones. Large noses might exude power and confidence, while small noses can appear delicate and cute. And let's not forget nostrils. Yes, even those have their admirers. For these guys, a nose isn't just a nose, but it's a work of art. Well, like many fetishes, nasophilia doesn't have a single clear cause, but there are several psychological and social factors that might contribute to someone developing this unique attraction. For instance, a person who grew up with positive memories involving noses, like affectionate boops or playful interactions, might evolve into a fascination in adulthood. Oculolinctus, also known as worming in some circles, is a paraphilia that involves deriving sexual arousal or pleasure from licking eyeballs or having your eyeball licked. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. No metaphors here. This fetish normally involves two people who experience the sensation in their own way. For the person doing the licking, there's the slippery, wet texture of the eye, and for the one being licked, it's the unusual, ticklish, and slightly invasive feeling of a tongue sliding across one of the most sensitive parts of the body. Now, as with most fetishes, oculolinctus has psychological and sensory underpinnings that make it appealing to certain individuals. First of all, there's the whole issue of trust and intimacy. Let's face it, letting someone lick your eyeball takes a lot of trust. Eyes are incredibly delicate, and the act of licking one requires a level of vulnerability that can deepen emotional and physical connections between partners. Also, your eyes are packed with nerve endings, and this makes it an incredibly sensitive area, so the unusual sensation of a tongue on their eyeball can be stimulating and even pleasurable. But then here is where things get tricky. You see, from a medical perspective, oculolinctus is not a safe practice and carries serious risks. The human mouth is full of bacteria, and introducing these microbes to the eye can cause serious infections, including conjunctivitis, aka pink eye, or even more severe conditions like corneal ulcers and even herpes simplex. Plus, the tongue isn't exactly a precision instrument. So if it scrapes the cornea, it could cause abrasions, swelling, discomfort, or long-term damage to the eye's surface. Thankfully, oculolinctus isn't exactly sweeping the world like a viral dance trend, but it has gained attention in recent years, especially in certain online communities and subcultures. It briefly made headlines in the early 2010s when reports surfaced of teens in Japan engaging in eyeball licking as a form of intimacy. However, these claims were largely exaggerated by media outlets. In reality, oculolinctus remains a niche fetish practiced by a small but devoted group of enthusiasts. Most people, understandably, can't imagine letting someone's tongue anywhere near their eyeball, and that's totally okay. Mashalania. It's a scorching hot day. The sun's blazing, the pavement feels like lava, and everyone's wearing as little clothes as socially acceptable. You walk into a bar dying for a cold beer, but just as you spot a frosty mug calling your name, someone nearby lifts their arms to stretch, revealing their armpits, and bam, your heart skips a beat. You're not sure why, but suddenly the air is thick with attraction and an unshakable chemistry. Well, here's the why. You have a fetish called mashalania, also known as the armpit fetish. For most people, armpits are like that one quiet kid in school, barely noticed, rarely talked about, and definitely not the center of attention. But for someone with mashalania, armpits are the headliners of the show, the main act in the theater of desire. Basically, this fetish is when someone finds armpits irresistibly attractive and can involve all sorts of armpit appreciation, from admiring their smooth appearance to enjoying their scent to touching, kissing, or even licking the area. For those with this fetish, the armpit is like a hidden treasure chest of sensuality. It's soft, delicate, and let's face it, kind of mysterious. What's even weirder than having an armpit fetish is that it may not be as crazy as it sounds. You see, your armpits are loaded with sweat glands, particularly apocrine glands, which release pheromones, those sneaky little chemical signals that can trigger attraction on a subconscious level. That musky natural scent that some people wrinkle their noses at, for others, it's like a love potion straight out of Harry Potter. It's primal, it's raw, it's biology doing its thing. There's also the fact that your armpit is like the satin sheet of the human body because the skin there is extremely soft and sensitive, which makes it incredibly stimulating. Basically, if the body were a road trip, the armpits would be one of those hidden scenic routes nobody talks about. But once you discover it, you'll be wondering why you never tried it before. Dacrophilia. Let's say you're watching a deeply emotional movie and one of the characters breaks down in tears, and while everyone else in the room is grabbing tissues and saying, "How sad," you're thinking about how pleasurable the sound of them wailing actually is. If that sounds familiar, you might be exploring the world of dacrophilia, which is a fetish where arousal is linked to tears, crying, or emotional vulnerability. It's not necessarily about causing tears, though for some it can be, but more about the emotional intensity and vulnerability that crying represents. So basically, people with dacrophilia might be drawn to the physical act of crying itself, like tears rolling down cheeks, quivering lips, or red, puffy eyes. Some are attracted to the emotional release that crying symbolizes, such as pain, sadness, or catharsis, while others just love the power dynamic involved, especially if one person is comforting or in control of the crying partner. However, for some people, it's really not about sadness or suffering in a malicious sense. Rather, it's about the intimacy of experiencing someone's raw, unfiltered emotions. But the weirdest part is that sometimes dacrophilia isn't even always about the other person. Some dacrophiles enjoy crying themselves and find release and arousal in their own emotional vulnerability. They might even deliberately trigger their own emotions or indulge in self-reflection to make themselves cry. Cremastistophilia. So you just came back from the club and were walking down a dark alley when someone suddenly comes out of nowhere and tries to mug you. Now, most people would feel a mix of fear, anger, and panic, but for someone with cremastistophilia, that moment of being robbed or coerced would spark something entirely different: arousal. Yes, you heard that right. Arousal. In a nutshell, cremastistophilia is a paraphilia where individuals derive sexual excitement or gratification from situations where they are being robbed, extorted, or otherwise financially or materially exploited. This fetish basically falls into the category of masochistic kinks, where pleasure is derived from being on the receiving end of certain forms of control, humiliation, or submission, and it thrives on the thrill of power imbalance, danger, and the emotional intensity of such scenarios. And while it might sound like the setup for a bizarre crime thriller, for some, it's a very real and specific source of arousal. Sometimes individuals would even practice something called findom, where they willingly give money, gifts, or financial control to a dominant partner. You should probably note that the attraction isn't necessarily about losing money itself. I mean, no one's thrilled about an empty wallet. Instead, it's about the emotional and psychological dynamics of the situation, the sense of vulnerability, the rush of adrenaline, and the control exerted by another person can create an intoxicating mix of fear and arousal. But cremastistophilia, like any fetish, requires clear communication and consent, so even exploring this kink with a partner through roleplay or findom can be safe and enjoyable when both parties are on the same page. However, indulging in this fetish outside of a consensual setting can be dangerous or even illegal. Symphorophilia. Just imagine leaving your house one morning to go on a jog and unfortunately witnessing a car crash. Your instant reaction would most probably be to quickly call 911 and offer help and sympathy to the people involved. However, for a person with symphorophilia, that crash isn't just a spectacle, it's an intense source of arousal. So, with symphorophilia, the person gets sexually aroused from witnessing or staging disasters, such as car crashes, fires, or other destructive events. Now understand that for these guys, the destruction itself is the turn-on. It's not just about watching something fall apart, it's about the dramatic high-stakes nature of the event, the emotional intensity, the adrenaline rush, and the spectacle of it all combined to create a potent source of arousal. Also, this fetish can also manifest in different ways depending on the individual's preferences and experiences. Some might find arousal in merely witnessing disasters, while others might feel compelled to create or stage destructive events to heighten their excitement. So, where does this come from? Well, psychologists think it might start early on, maybe a childhood experience involving a dramatic moment like a car crash, a house fire, or a major disaster. That mix of fear, adrenaline, and excitement might stick around and, over time, morph into something a little spicier. It's like their brain took a wild ride on the emotional roller coaster and decided to recreate the event, but in a sexier way. In a strange way, symphorophilia isn't so alien. Humans are obsessed with destruction. Why do you think demolition videos have millions of views? Or why do we all slow down at accidents despite swearing we're better than that? Symphorophiles just crank that curiosity up to 11. It's like regular people watching things fall apart for fun, except with symphorophiles, the fall apart is fueling their sexual arousal. And no judgment here either, because the same way some people like watching buildings implode, others are into a good rom-com. To each their own.